So this is the block that I lived on. It's hard for me to sit here and really explain to you and for you to really feel what actually transpired that day. To say that I was in complete fear, it doesn't even do it justice. Honestly, I thought that I was about to die.
In a shootout tonight in Brooklyn, Gregory Scarpa Sr. was shot in the face right up the block from his Dyker Heights home.
My Sweet 16 was a really big deal. You could tell in the video how much he loves me.
According to police, Scarpa has been under house arrest, and he hadn't left his home in several months.
When I look at him like that, I just can't fathom the stuff that he did. And I just cannot believe that it's the same person. And it's so confusing for me to have to deal with that. Once my father had it in his head that he had to kill someone, he was doing it. This was our dining room table, and this is me hugging my father. I just loved hugging him. You could see whatever pictures me and my father were in together. It was not my mother holding my father, it was me holding my father. It just made me feel good, it made me feel secure. And I still have all those memories where I feel that sense of love and comfort from him. In that sense, he wasn't really much different than other fathers. But he had this rage in him. I used to refer to my father as the Hulk because I would see this man who was just like a regular man transform into like this big creature who was capable of like breaking everything and like destruction. Stuff that he's done, sometimes I still can't even believe. When I talk about it and I say it out loud, I'm like, wow, did he really do that? It's just like, I still just can't even believe it. That vicinity of 13th Avenue felt like it was ours. Like he ran that part of the neighborhood. Whatever restaurant we went to with my father, even the luncheonette, as soon as he walked through the door and we walked in the door with him, the red carpet didn't literally come out, but that's what it felt like. People that were higher up than my father were listening to him, not the other way around.
Well, look at that. Anything you want, it's on the house.
It wasn't like when you go into the diner and you say, can I please have a burger and fries? Stuff is just coming to you and, oh, what do you want, honey? You can have anything that you want.
Oh, there it is. Look at that.
Everything just felt like it belonged to us because we got treated like royalty in these places.
Thanks, Ray.
I mean, they really let my father just do whatever he wanted. I didn't know why we were getting all these perks and royal treatment. I never really understood why. I just thought like, wow, my dad is something else, you know? So right now I'm standing in front of the Wimpy Boys Social Club. Why they called it the Wimpy Boys Social Club, I'll never know, because nobody was wimpy in there. And whenever we would pull up, my father's friends would always greet us with hugs and kisses, and, you know, everybody just treated us really, really well. So this is an actual photo of my father hanging out in front of the club here. This is a surveillance photo. He was being watched at the time, and he doesn't look very happy. But the reason why I like this picture, even though it's a surveillance photo, is because it actually brings back, you know, a memory of him, but me, a little girl pulling up in front of the club and seeing him outside. I didn't really fully understand everything that was going on when I was real young, but my father definitely had a presence that stood out. He ran that neighborhood. Well, there was one time that I remember waking up and running down the stairs.
Whoa.
And seeing our dining room table full, and I mean from end to end, full of jewelry, covered. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And he's like, oh, Santa Claus came early. And I'm like, Santa Claus? I was touching everything at first and putting stuff on, and I mean big diamonds and rubies and everything. And I was trying everything on, playing with it. And I had some questions because I was so confused.
What is all this?
Hey, don't you think you should be upstairs in bed?
But what is it?
All this?
Yeah.
This is my winnings.
Your winnings?
Yeah, my winnings.
And he says, I'm a professional gambler. I'm like, oh, what? What's that? He's like, yeah, I gamble professionally. That's a real job. I said, oh, okay.
You like that one? Now it's yours.
Not funny, Dad.
I'm not being funny. When my daughter wants something, I make sure she gets it.
Instead.
So I didn't think anything of it, you know? I was still too young to really grasp what was happening. He definitely had a different personality than any of my friends' fathers.
Jenna, what happened? Billy shoved me into the fence and told me to get off the field. I'm sick of him. He's always messing with me.
I'm not sure how old we were, but my brother had gotten into an argument with somebody on the block.
Hey, what did I hear you just say?
The kid kind of bullied him. And my brother came back and he was, you know, huffing and puffing and he was all upset.
Nobody messes with a Scarpa.
But he's bigger than me.
Hey, stop it. When I tell you to do something, that's it. You do it. Actually, you wait right there.
And my father said, you go and you take this bat, and he gave my brother a bat. You go over there to that kid and you tell him that you're gonna hit him with that bat. And if you have to hit him with the bat, hit him with the bat.
And if he does it again, you hit him. Did you hear me?
Yeah.
So my brother went walking over there with a bat, thinking that this was what he was supposed to do. I don't know what happened. All I know is that our first experience with a bully is you go and hit the person with the bat. I got caught smoking pot with my friend.
Hey, Glinda, get down here!
What's up, Dad?
I could not believe the beating that this kid had. I don't know how he survived that beating. If something happened that my father didn't agree with, somebody would get hurt. So then I would have to make new friends because those friends wouldn't want to stay with me anymore. They wouldn't want to hang out anymore. I got caught smoking pot with my friend. I had a curfew that night, and when I had to go home, I was messed up.
You're late.
I'm sorry, Dad. I lost track of time.
Are you high?
Oh, Dad, come on.
Look at her, she's high.
My father was like, oh my God, she's high. I want to know who you were with.
It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal. Who gave you the drugs?
And I'm like, I'm not telling you who I was with. I wouldn't give up my friend.
Who gave you the drug? I'm gonna find out who did this.
but he was determined to find out who I was with. The next day, my friend got beaten badly. I don't know how he survived that beating.
Hey, Glenda, get down here!
His father came knocking on my door and said, "Why did you do this to my son?" So my father says, "You want to know why I did that to your son? Come inside."
What's up, Dad?
You give my daughter drugs, then you're gonna get beaten, a bad one.
And it'll happen every time!
And I was like, oh my God. And my father says, "You see, this is what happens when you do drugs with anyone, so you may want to think again before you do it." I looked at my friend, and he gave me the dirtiest look. And I was heartbroken. I mean, I knew that my best friend is gone. He's never gonna be my friend again.
I'm sorry. We should go.
I was just trying to be a kid. I just wanted to have fun.
Get out of my sight.
Needless to say, I really never did drugs after that. My Sweet 16 was a really big deal, and my parents were going to throw this really big party, almost like a wedding. I had a lot of my father's friends and their wives and family come. All these guys would be dressed in like the Fila sweatsuits, the velour suits, lots of jewelry, flashy, good looking. But a lot of the people that I invited, 2 tables of people didn't show up. They did say that they would come, but they never did. And I said to my father, "Is it me? Am I ugly? Like, why doesn't anyone want to talk to me?" He's like, "Don't you get it by now?" And I'm like, "No, get what? Don't you understand who your father is? This is why they don't want to talk to you. It's not because you're ugly." That back. How did he go from that to putting us in the line of, danger? We're getting picked up by car service to go to school every day.
Morning, Linda.
My brother was sick one day and he wasn't going to school. And the driver, he said, "Oh, why don't you sit in the front since you're by yourself today?" I was like, "Okay." So I sat in the front and he was talking normal the whole ride. And then I realized that he was going into Prospect Park. And I said, "Where are you going?" And he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I have to take care of something." I'm like, okay, but it was feeling not right. It wasn't feeling right. When he stopped the car and there was nobody around,
What's going on? What are we doing here?
I knew that something was really wrong.
Oh, it's all right.
He just came on to me and I was freaking out.
I need to get to school.
Mm-hmm. This won't take long.
He took my hand and he pulled my shirt. This is bad. I'm gonna die. This guy's gonna rape me and he's gonna have to kill me. What is he gonna do with me after that? He's not gonna take me to school. This is really bad. So I said to him,
Wait. What's the rush?
"Listen, you don't have to do this. We could go somewhere after school." And he goes, "What?" And I go, "If you pick me up after school, I could tell my parents that I'm going to my friend's house and we could be gone the whole day till the night. And we'll have so much fun." I had to make him believe this.
All right.
And he took me to school. And I remember calling my mother and saying in a panic, "Hurry up and come and get me." I was like, "Hurry, hurry." So she came and she's like, "What's going on?" And I told her and she was crying. She was angry. She was livid. My father just like lost it.
What'd you just say?
He's cursing, he's yelling.
Somebody touches you and that's it.
I knew something was gonna happen, right?
Honey, I'm so sorry. He grabbed me and I thought that was gonna be it.
What'd you just say?
My father just like lost it.
Somebody touches you and that's it.
While I was in the house and I was saying I'm never going to school again, I'm never going out again, I'm afraid. My father went out and I was questioning where he was. He came back and he told me that I never had to worry about him again.
Hi.
Yeah.
I just want you to know you don't ever have to be afraid.
And I'm like, what do you mean, why?
What does that mean?
It means he's never coming back.
And he's like, he's gone. He's gone.
Good night.
He was in the newspaper the next day. I didn't want him to get killed. It bothered me that this happened to him, but I was taught that you don't call the cops. To me, the cops were the bad guys. But this is what I was being taught. You don't get the cops involved. I was really torn up about it. And I carried that article in my wallet for a long time. Just the fact that he was dead was weighing on me. I felt the need that I needed to hold on to that. No one knew that I had it, and sometimes I would go back and look at it. But eventually I had lost the wallet and lost the article, and I kind of just moved on. This is my father and Joe Brewster. I don't know how long it's been since I've seen a picture of Joe. He was just a really great guy. My father and Joe Brewster were really close. They had a really tight relationship. He was like an uncle, he part of the family. Very loving, attentive, and caring towards us. But then Joe started to change. He started to drink heavy.
You're a good kid, Linda.
Thanks, Joe.
Even one of the last times that I seen him, I remember that he was really drunk. He wanted to change his life, to live a Christian life.
This work, it really eats you up. I don't want to do it no more.
I didn't want to do anything illegal anymore. But I didn't think anything of it.
I'm just gonna get another drink.
So Joe Brewster would come to the house quite often, and then he just wasn't there anymore, and I started to question where he was.
Hey, Dad.
Hey, Linda.
Why doesn't Joe come around anymore?
And my father said that he died. And I'm like, he died? What do you mean? Like, how'd he die? And he wasn't specific about how he died at all. I remember being very depressed about it and very sad. And I actually sat there and I said to myself, like, did my father kill Joe? I'm like, no, he would never do that. Like, Joe was like our family. was trying to block out all of the bad things, you know, the beatings and hearing about all these people getting killed in the neighborhood. I was just trying to really just block it out. My earliest memory of Linda Vecchio was over the phone.
Hello?
I would answer these calls and he would say that his name was Mr. Dello, and he would ask for my father.
Dad!
Yeah.
Mr. Dello's on the phone. He says he's coming right away. Hi, yeah, I let him know. Okay, bye.
What are you doing?
And one time my father said, "You can't do that. You can't say that name in the house and yell it from upstairs." And I'm like, "Why?" And he's like, "You just can't do that."
You can't say that name out loud.
Okay, sorry. He says he'll be here in 15 minutes.
All right, go downstairs and lock the doors.
Now!
I remember it was a holiday and Mr. Dello was coming to the house, so it was a big deal. Whenever Lynn would come to the house, everything had to be shut. All the blinds, the front door. No one was allowed out, no one was allowed in. It was a secret. I would be told to go upstairs, and I would go upstairs, but I would stay at the top of my stairs, and I would listen.
So we moved down the avenue, we saw these guys, you know, and there's 4 or 5 of them. I don't know what to say to them, but they were those guys you were talking about.
That was nothing really out of the ordinary for me.
What about the guys from the week before?
They're out.
But I knew that it was like top secret. My brother Joey only had a few tight friends, and one of them got into trouble. Him and my brother did something stupid out in the street, and it got back to my father that Patrick was being questioned by the police and that he was going to rat.
It's not gonna be all right. Rat is a rat.
My father ordered my brother to kill his friend. I was there for the conversation that my father had. Patrick was being questioned by the police.
He's a rat.
So my father ordered my brother to kill his friend.
It's not gonna be all right. Rat is a rat.
My brother told him, "No way, I'm not doing that." He told my father, "He's never gonna do that, Dad. He's not gonna do that. Stop. He's not, like, I don't want him to die." And he's trying to defend his friend to my father.
That was a mistake. You both messed up. He crossed the line that there's no coming back from.
My father does not want to hear any of it. You have no choice. You have to kill him.
You kill him or I kill him.
Once my father had it in his head that he had to kill someone, he was doing it.
Look at me. Do we have an understanding on that or not?
We hated him for that. My father had him killed and made my brother watch. I'll never forget it because my brother was horrified. He cried in his room, and I had to watch my brother suffer for something that he never wanted to happen. To watch his friend be shot like that and dumped in the street. This is Patrick Porco. To think that they would just disregard a body the way they disregarded it, like just dump it in the street like that. It makes me think about the suffering that he went through. But this was not anything abnormal at that time and that era, because bodies were being found like this all the time. I was like a rebel without a cause after that. I was just looking for any way out. And I had met someone. We dated for about a year and then we got married. I really was not even that crazy about him, but I was already 4 or 5 months pregnant.
I'm pregnant. You're out running around like you're in high school.
I'm not.
We were real volatile towards each other. We were just not a good mix, and it was getting bad.
I hang out with my friends once and you start flipping out on
You
me.
just better take this seriously.
Don't treat me like a kid.
Don't behave like one.
And forget you. Are you okay?
He's such a baby. He makes me so angry.
You know, I can get rid of him.
What?
So my father asked me permission to kill him.
Nobody hurts my daughter. Well, they deal with me.
No. You can't hurt him.
And I told him, no, Dad, you can't do that. I couldn't live with that. You know, he asked me literally outright, I can't do this without your permission. I said no. This particular day, I left at the same time as my father. And I heard some popping sounds. I look up and I see men surrounding my father's car with black clothes, black ski masks, and guns, shooting at him. I thought I was gonna die. I didn't know what was happening. Somehow my father got away. I was left there with all of these guys. And I remember being so scared. And one of the guys ran over to my car. I'm hunched down and I remember looking up and seeing his eyes and he looked right at me. At that moment, I'm thinking, are they gonna kill me? Everything's happening so fast, but yet it feels like it's taking forever. And he ran. And they left me. So this is the block that I lived on. It's hard for me to sit here and really explain to you and for you to really feel what actually transpired that day. To say that I was in complete fear, it doesn't even do it justice. I had zero control over my life at that moment. Honestly, I thought that I was about to die. That's when my panic attack started. Sometimes when I'm in a car, I get panic attacks. Loud popping sounds, like a balloon pops from one of the kids or something like that. Seeing the lights from an ambulance, that can cause flashbacks. So we went from having no fear to having complete fear. There was constant fear. Fear that something would happen to my father, fear that something would happen to my brother. But we were completely vulnerable. My mother gets to the door and she's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, they tried to kill Daddy. I don't know. I think Daddy's dead. I don't know. And I'm just like ranting and raving, going crazy. Next thing I know, my father walks into the door. He didn't know if I was alive, So he broke down and he was so emotional. He started to cry.
I can't believe you're safe. I'm sorry.
Just the relief of seeing us, he just broke down.
We're okay.
But as soon as my father got himself together, his emotions turned into rage real quick. He just stopped crying and he said, they're all gonna die. Every single one of them responsible for this. I was scared to death. Now he was out for pure revenge. Every night after that attempted hit on him, he was going out looking for people. And if he found someone, he did. If he didn't, he didn't. Tomorrow's another day. That's basically how it was. This one particular night, he found someone and he pulled up alongside the guy and blew his face off.
Oh, you guys are not gonna believe it.
And when he came home, he was so pumped up and excited. He said to my mother, you'll never believe who I got. I blew his nose right off of his face. And I'm sitting on the couch watching TV and we're just looking at each other like, oh, the horror of that. My father just came home from killing someone. How do you deal with that? To have to accept it and go about our day, how do you do that? But we had to. People were dying in the street, so I was really surprised that he got house arrest. But that's how I found out. Linda Vecchio was an FBI agent. And he was my father's handler. All those years, he was like James Bond, the secret agent. And that's why it was top secret.
How far exactly from the house can I go with this thing?
Greg, come on. Be happy I was able to keep you out of prison.
He should have went straight to jail, but because he had this man in his life, he was given that opportunity to be on house arrest. People say that my father worked with the FBI. It was like the FBI was working for him.
Listen, that's the way this thing works. I help you, you help me.
He had them here. And that's what made him so invincible to himself and why he thought that he could, do whatever he wanted to do.
Hey, Joey.
My brother comes home. He had an argument with some guys in the street, and they pulled a gun on him, and my father became enraged.
Oh, come on, what are you doing?
What do you mean, what am I doing? We gotta go over there and show them. Teach them a lesson. You don't treat a scarper like that.
There was no stopping him. They pulled a gun on his son, and they're gonna pay.
Turn around and let's go.
Dad, you're gonna go to jail.
This'll just take a minute.
He left the house and didn't care about the bracelet.
Dad, no, you can't leave!
I remember hearing the screaming and the shooting because it was only 2 blocks away. And I don't know what's happening. And next thing I know, the car pulls up and my father gets out of the car covered in blood. He was stumbling and he had his hand like this, and I went to grab him and he said, don't touch me. He asked me for a towel. I got him the towel, and that's when I noticed that his eye was gone. He was shot in the eye. I was frantic. Oh my God, Dad, what happened? You need an ambulance. And he said, no, I don't need an ambulance.
Hello?
The phone rang because his bracelet was going off, and they asked for my father.
Yeah, this is Greg.
And he got on the phone as if it was just a regular day. And meanwhile, he has no eye. I said, you need to get to the hospital. And he said, have somebody take me. So I went and called one of his friends, and they came and got him and took him to the hospital. And that's when I knew that it was over.
Cops say there's been an ongoing feud within the reputed Colombo mob family, and believe the alleged Colombo capo was the target.
He was a mobster. Here's this person that I know all of this stuff about, but I didn't have that word, mobster. I was surprised that he was actually a gangster. I knew he was a tough guy, but I never ever imagined. We're in the midst of a huge war within the Colombo crime family.
In a shootout tonight in Brooklyn, Gregory Scarpa Sr. was shot in the face right up the block from his Diker Heights home. Investigators are now trying to figure out if this was part of the feud.
There was tension between the two sides of the family. So friends are killing friends. He was not the only hitman for the Colombo family, but he was the hitman for them. If they needed to get something done, they knew who to go to. That was him. They would call him the Grim Reaper or the Killing Machine.
In the past 14 months, more than 10 people have been killed in the fight for control of the Colombo crime family.
I don't know how many people he killed, but there have been reports where they have said that he stopped counting at 50. You're hearing all the stuff in the news about mobsters, you hear all these different names, but I wasn't thinking my father was that type of person too.
Scarpa is due to face federal racketeering charges if he survives his gunshot wound.
It's very confusing to love someone who's capable of murder because you want to love this person unconditionally. And I did love my father unconditionally. I just didn't want to picture my father to be the one to do it. I was supposed to go and see him that weekend. My father called the house from prison, and he said to me, I don't know if I'm gonna be here, I don't know if I'm gonna make it. And I said, no, Dad, you have to, I'm coming to see you, just hold on. He died, I think, like 2 days after. Hold on. I need a minute. Sorry. My father lived his life, I feel that my brother never got to live his life, so if I could have one of them back, it would be my brother. This grave was supposed to be for my mother and my father. So to see my father and my brother's name here, this wasn't supposed to be. Every once in a while, if I'm having a really bad day, I'll just like yell at my father, blame him for everything under the sun. But my father is who he is and was who he was, and there was no changing that. I feel lost without both of them.
Cinematic voiceover style, continuous flow, no summaries, no teasers, no breaks. The night the city went silent began like any other, wrapped in the damp, familiar breath of Seattle rain, the kind that slid off street lamps in long silver threads and soaked the pavement until every reflection seemed warped, uneasy, almost alive. It was the kind of night where people hurried home with collars raised, where windows glowed like small promises of safety, and where no one expected the kind of disappearance that would later be whispered as a cold case. A headline waiting to happen, an echo trapped in the dark. It started with a single scream swallowed by the wind, a flash of movement near an alley behind Pioneer Square, and then nothing. No witnesses, no clear sound, just the sensation that something had slipped out of the world without leaving permission or explanation. A mystery forming in real time, already taking shape as an unsolved crime before dawn even arrived. Her name, though it would take days for it to appear on missing person posters, was Elena Ward, 23, a college senior who scribbled dreams into notebooks, kept her keys looped on a neon strap, and believed that the world, despite its sharp edges, still held more kindness than cruelty. She was last seen leaving a late shift at Harbor Cafe, the small family restaurant where she worked evenings to pay rent, waving goodbye to a coworker who would later replay that moment 100 times in their head, wondering if they should have walked her to her car, wondering if escorting her half a block might have rewritten the future. But the present moved too quickly, and caution was just another thought brushed away in the noise of the city. The next morning, when Elena missed a scheduled meeting with her advisor, a meeting she had been preparing for all week, the first ripple of worry began. By noon, her roommate was pacing the living room, staring at an untouched bowl of cereal, calling Elena's phone repeatedly just to hear it ring into an endless void. By sunset, police were notified, though at first it was treated like any other disappearance. Maybe she had taken an impulsive trip, maybe she needed space, maybe she was staying with a friend. But hour by hour, the possibilities narrowed. The unease sharpened, and soon the name Elena Ward became tethered to a fear that seeped into both campus and community, growing like a shadow, stretching long across the neighborhood. Detectives combed Pioneer Square with flashlights slicing through the dark rain dripping from their jackets as they searched between dumpsters, sewer grates, and the thin spaces where secrets liked to hide. They questioned bartenders, shop owners, homeless residents who drifted between shelters, anyone who might have seen a woman walking alone, holding an umbrella, patterned with tiny yellow stars. But memory under rain is unreliable, slippery, and most people shook their heads apologetic, certain that they would remember if something strange had happened, yet no one did. Or no one admitted to it. The case gathered momentum quickly, the kind that attracts reporters and sparks whispers. Footage from street cameras was blurry with raindrops streaking down the lenses, turning humans into ghost-like silhouettes. Cars passed, shadows crossed, but nothing solid, nothing concrete. Just shapes dissolving into wet pavement, leaving investigators clutching at fragments that fell apart the moment they were touched. Then came the rumor someone claimed they'd heard arguing near the alley, voices tense footsteps running. Someone else swore they saw a man in a dark coat standing too long under a street lamp, staring at nothing as though waiting for a signal only he could hear, but none of it held. None of it tied together. It was a puzzle, missing the central pieces, a story beginning without a middle or end. When the first missing person flyers appeared stapled to telephone poles and fluttering in the breeze, Seattle paused. It wasn't the first disappearance, but something about Elena felt different, maybe because she was young and bright, Maybe because her smile in the photo was so disarmingly alive. Maybe because the community sensed this wasn't a case of someone simply vanishing by choice. This felt like a fracture in the rhythm of the city, a warning carried on the rain-slick streets. Days turned into weeks. Police interviewed friends, co-workers, neighbors. They inspected her apartment where her books were stacked neatly, where her backpack sat beside her desk, as if waiting for her return. Nothing was disturbed. Nothing suggested she had planned to leave. Her diary entries spoke of essays, shifts, weekend plans, ordinary life broken abruptly by something extraordinary and cruel. Detective Harris, the lead investigator, was known for his persistence in missing person cases, a man who believed that every disappearance left a trace, even if it was microscopic, buried under years, or hidden in plain sight. He walked the route from Elena's workplace to her apartment, over and over, memorizing each storefront, each alley, each faint smear of graffiti on brick walls. He imagined her holding her umbrella, stepping carefully around puddles, maybe humming a song she liked. He imagined someone watching her, someone following. But imagination wasn't evidence, and evidence was something the case refused to give. By the third week, media declared it another mysterious Seattle disappearance, a phrase that felt too rehearsed, too hollow, as if the city had grown accustomed to unexplained gaps in its population. But Elena's parents, who flew in from Spokane with trembling hands and sleepless eyes, refused to accept silence as the final answer. They organized vigils, handed out flyers, begged for leads. Crowds gathered in candlelight, their reflections flickering on rain-dotted sidewalks, murmuring prayers, wishing for a miracle that never came. A month after Elena vanished, detectives discovered an object half buried beneath a collapsed cardboard box in the alley behind Pioneer Square, a silver necklace with a cracked moon pendant. Elena's roommate confirmed it was hers. But it wasn't enough. The necklace could have fallen days earlier, or it could have been intentionally placed there. No blood, no fingerprints. Just a cold piece of metal, mute and stubborn, refusing to tell the truth. And then silence. The case slowed. Leads dried. Witnesses forgot or misremembered. Months slipped by, turning into a year, then 2, then 5. The folder, labeled Ward Elena Missing, thickened slowly with dead ends until it was eventually moved into storage among other unresolved files cases that law enforcement whispered about as cold, the ones that haunted investigators in the quiet corners of their minds when they wondered what more they could have done. But even forgotten cases breathe. They wait. They linger until something, someone, or some accident shakes them loose again. And for Elena, that moment came unexpectedly in the form of a construction project nearly 2 decades later, a redevelopment plan pushing deep into the old brick foundations near Pioneer Square. Workers unearthed debris pipes, fragments of what the city had buried under layers of progress, until one worker's shovel struck something that wasn't stone, wasn't wood, and wasn't any material meant to be there. A small metal lockbox, old, rusted, out of place. When the foreman pried it open, expecting maybe tools or scrap, what he saw instead made him stumble back and shout for someone to call the police immediately. Inside lay items wrapped in plastic, a faded photograph, a torn piece of fabric, and something else, something that would soon become the spark that reignited the entire investigation, setting off headlines, panic, disbelief, and a truth the city had buried almost as deeply as the lockbox itself. But for now, before answers surfaced, before detectives rushed back into a case they once thought cold forever, the lockbox sat silently in the rain-soaked hands of a construction worker dripping mud, waiting for its secrets to finally be heard. The lockbox arrived at the precinct wrapped in a thick evidence bag, escorted by 2 officers whose expressions carried the same unsettled tension as the construction workers who had found it. Even before investigators opened it under controlled conditions, whispers circled the station like an undying current, tugging at old memories, reviving names filed away in dusty drawers. The moment Detective Harris heard the words Pioneer Square and buried container, something inside him jolted awake, something that had slept beneath years of failed leads and unanswered questions. He walked toward the evidence room with a steadiness that didn't match the storm building behind his eyes, as though his body moved on instinct, while his mind replayed the night Elena vanished, every step of her last known path echoing like footsteps in an abandoned hallway. The forensic team opened the box with meticulous caution, snapping photographs labeling every inch. Inside lay 3 items: the faded photograph of a young woman with her face carefully scratched out a torn strip of navy blue fabric, with what looked like a broken metal clasp still attached, and a folded slip of paper browned with age containing just 4 handwritten words. You never found her. The handwriting was jagged, tilted downward, as if written in haste or agitation, each letter bleeding slightly into the paper, as though the message itself wanted to spread to stain to infect whoever read it. The room fell unnervingly quiet as investigators stared at the objects. No one spoke at first. No one needed to. The tension said enough. Harris leaned closer, his gaze fixed on the torn strip of fabric. Something about the texture, the stitching, the clasp, he recognized it. Or he thought he did. Memory blurred, but instinct sharpened. He asked for the old case files, the ones boxed and shelved under layers of dust. When the folders were laid out before him, his fingers flipped through pages yellowed with time, missing person reports, interviews, maps circled in red ink photos of Elena smiling, as though she had no idea her image would one day become an emblem of fear and heartbreak. Then he saw it, the same navy blue strap on the bag Elena carried to work every night. The bag was never recovered. Investigators assumed she had it with her the night she vanished. But this torn piece with its familiar clasp shifted that assumption dramatically. It suggested her belongings had been forcibly taken. It suggested a struggle. It suggested someone had taken the time to bury evidence deliberately, not discard it. And the note, 4 chilling words, made it clear that whoever was responsible wanted the case to stay cold, wanted the disappearance to remain an unsolvable riddle haunting the city's consciousness. Forensics ran tests immediately: dirt samples, residue, fiber analysis. The photograph, once cleaned, revealed the faint outline of a brick facade in the background, possibly a building near the square, though it was too blurred to be certain. But it wasn't the woman's face that mattered. It was the violent intent behind the scratches, the deliberate effort to erase her identity. Someone wanted to remove her existence piece by piece until all that remained was fear. While labs worked, officers returned to the construction site. They scanned the ground with metal detectors, dug deeper into the earth, searched for additional containers or remnants. Nothing else surfaced. But what was found was enough. Enough to reopen the file. Enough to bring back a swarm of reporters. Enough to trigger headlines across the city. 1995 cold case resurfaces with shocking evidence found underground. Enough to turn Seattle's quiet unease into a rising tide of speculation and dread. Detective Harris found himself revisiting old interviews, names that hadn't been spoken aloud in years, voices from transcripts echoing through his mind. One name stood out more than others. Mitchell Crane, a local handyman with a history of loitering near Pioneer Square around the time Elena disappeared. He was interviewed once in 1995. After someone reported seeing him talking to a woman matching Elena's description, but nothing tied him directly to the case, and he slipped away into the background noise of the investigation. The file noted he moved out of state shortly after leaving behind only a thin paper trail. But now, with the lockbox surfacing just steps from where he was last seen, Harris felt the pull of something long overlooked. He ordered a nationwide query. Crane's last known address, employment records, criminal history, anything that might reveal where he was, what he had done, who he had become. And then the first shock hit. Crane had died in 2011, a victim of a fire that consumed a rural cabin in Montana. No relatives, no digital footprint, no surviving possessions except a few boxes of old tools found in a shed. A dead suspect meant a dead end, or it should have. But Harris didn't believe in convenient coincidences. He dug deeper, calling the local sheriff's department in Montana, asking for reports, inventory lists, witness statements. Hours passed before a sergeant emailed a file containing photographs of items recovered after the fire, mostly charred, barely recognizable. But one photo caught Harris's attention, a small metal key, rusted and warped by heat, found near Crane's bed. The key had an unusual shape, square head, double notches, and when Harris compared it to the lockbox unearthed in Seattle, his breath stopped. The boxes from the construction site used the same type of key. A thread had emerged, faint but undeniable, and threads once pulled unravel everything. Detectives traveled to Montana speaking with anyone who remembered Crane. Most described him as quiet, solitary someone who kept to himself. But one neighbor, an elderly woman with sun-spotted hands and a wary stare, recalled something unsettling. She said Crane often walked the perimeter of his property at night, mumbling to himself, sometimes stopping to dig small holes in the ground before filling them again. When she asked once what he was burying, he stared at her with a vacant expression and said, "Things that don't belong above ground." At the time, she dismissed it as the ramblings of a strange man, but now the memory felt ominous, heavy with new meaning. Back in Seattle, the lab delivered another blow of revelation. The torn strap contained traces of soil not native to Pioneer Square, not from the alley, not from the surrounding environment. Instead, its mineral composition matched soil near the waterfront, specifically an area behind an old warehouse district that in 1995 was slated for redevelopment. That meant the box wasn't buried in the square originally. It had been moved, relocated, transferred from one hiding place to another as though someone was trying to keep it concealed, but closer to familiar ground. Why would Crane move evidence years after the crime unless someone else moved it? Unless someone else knew? The possibility widened the investigation with brutal force. Maybe Crane wasn't acting alone. Maybe he had a partner. Maybe someone was still out there alive, aware, watching the news now with slow, deliberate breaths, realizing that the past was clawing its way back into the light. Detective Harris revisited the scene again, standing in the exact spot where the lockbox was found. The city hummed around him, unaware of the storm gathering at its edges. Rain misted the air, soft but persistent, settling on his coat like a reminder of that night in 1995. He closed his eyes, visualizing Elena's last walk, the sound of her steps on wet pavement, the glow of a distant street lamp, the silhouette that might have followed. Then he noticed something. A patch of ground a few feet from where the box had been unearthed. Slightly sunken, the soil darker and looser. Fresh disturbance. Recent. Within weeks, maybe even days. His pulse spiked. He called for a team. They cordoned off the area, brought tools scanners, and methodically began to dig. In less than an hour, another object surfaced. A second container. Smaller, newer, black plastic instead of metal. Inside lay a USB drive sealed in waterproof casing, a scrap of newspaper dated 8 months prior, and a red string wound tightly around a single Polaroid photograph. The photo showed a shadowy alley, possibly the same one near Pioneer Square, captured at night. In the corner of the image, almost out of frame, was a figure wearing a hood. The face wasn't visible, but written on the back of the Polaroid in the same jagged handwriting as the lockbox note were 5 words, still looking in the wrong place. The air went still electric with dread. The discovery was too recent, too calculated, too deliberate, which meant only one thing. Someone had been here. Someone was watching. Someone was still playing. And the case, once cold as the deepest winter, had come roaring back to life with a force that chilled every investigator to the bone. The precinct felt different the moment the second container surfaced, as if every fluorescent light grew harsher, every footstep echoed more sharply, every whispered conversation carried a tremor beneath it. Detectives moved with a heightened sense of awareness, glancing to windows, checking hallways, wondering if the person who left the USB drive had stood nearby, silently observing their reactions. It was no longer just a cold case being revived. It was a message in motion, a taunt from someone who seemed to understand the investigation better than those leading it. Someone who didn't fear exposure. Someone who wanted the game to continue, who wanted the city to feel the old fear again, fear that had once smothered Seattle in 1995 like a fog that refused to lift. Detective Harris sat before the evidence table staring at the Polaroid as though it held a map, a code, a confession hidden between the blurred shadows. He studied the hooded figure, the posture, the way the shoulders angled slightly forward, a stance of someone accustomed to avoiding cameras, someone intentional. The Polaroid, unlike the lockbox contents, felt fresh. It still had that faint chemical scent. It hadn't been buried long. Whoever planted it wanted it to be found immediately, wanted it to be touched, examined, feared. The USB drive was sent to digital forensics, locked inside a Faraday case to prevent remote tampering. Specialists worked in a sealed room, screens glowing across their glasses as they cracked encrypted layers one by one. Meanwhile, Harris poured himself into the old files again, breathing in the paper, the handwriting, the photographs that once held hope of resolution. He lingered longest on the witness reports, scattered statements from people who barely remembered what they saw, their memories blurred by rain-panic darkness. But his mind kept circling back to one interview, one that seemed unimportant at the time, a janitor working the night shift in a nearby office building who claimed he saw a woman running into the alley minutes after a scream echoed through Pioneer Square. The statement seemed contradictory. The woman didn't match Elena's description, and no other missing person reports emerged that week. The janitor, flustered and distracted, later retracted parts of his account, claiming he might have confused the dates. Investigators chalked it up to misremembered details and moved on. But now, with evidence resurfacing 20 years later, deliberate, taunting, orchestrated, Harris wondered if the janitor wasn't confused at all. Maybe he saw something real. Maybe he saw someone involved. Maybe that woman never came forward because she couldn't, or wouldn't, or was warned not to. The digital forensics team called him in. The USB drive contained a single file, no metadata, no timestamps, just a video, 37 seconds long, grainy black and white, filmed in darkness. A shaky camera moved toward an alley wall where a faint chalk outline of an arrow pointed downward. Then the camera tilted to the ground, illuminating a section of concrete marked with a smear of something dark, almost black. At first glance, it looked like dirt or spilled oil. But as the flashlight in the video shifted, the smear glistened thicker, irregular, seeping into tiny cracks like something organic. Blood, but old, very old. The final frame of the video zoomed hard onto the smear. A distorted whisper scraped through the speakers, not fully audible, but enough for the room's temperature to drop a few degrees. It sounded like a fragment of a sentence warped almost beyond recognition. But when slowed down and cleaned through audio software, the whisper became painfully clear. You walked past this. The message stabbed at the very heart of the investigation. Whoever filmed the video stood in a location investigators had searched, maybe even thoroughly, in 1995. A place overlooked, dismissed, or compromised by human error. A place where something had been left behind and ignored. The smear, if it really was blood, could change everything. Detective Harris assembled a team and returned to Pioneer Square at once. Rain hissed along the pavement as they moved through the alley flashlights, slicing through the dim like sharp white blades. They studied the walls, the ground, the drains, searching for the chalk arrow from the video. Hours passed. Nothing. The city grew quieter. Foot traffic faded. Bar signs flickered off. The air thickened with that familiar Seattle dampness that seemed to swallow sound and soften edges. Then one of the officers called out softly, urgency woven into her tone. There, beneath a warped wooden pallet leaning against the far wall, was a faint chalk line nearly washed away by time, weather, and neglect. A single arrow pointing downward, exactly like the video. Harris knelt hand steady despite the electric pulse beneath his skin. He lifted the pallet with the help of two officers. The concrete beneath it was darker cold to the touch, as if it had been shielded from the world for decades. When they brushed away the grime with delicate care, a flash of discoloration emerged. A stain, irregular edges, subtle but unmistakable. The scent of damp concrete rose sharply as they swabbed samples with sterile kits. Under flashlight, the stain looked like nothing more than time-worn residue, but something about its pattern. The irregular spatter, the elongated tail, whispered violence. Impact. Movement. struggle. The area was sealed for deeper analysis. A portable luminol kit was sprayed in a narrow mist, and within seconds a faint blue glow flickered like a ghost waking from sleep. The glow spread into branching veins across the ground, tracing the path of something that once dripped, pooled, and was partially washed away, likely by rain, maybe by someone trying to clean their sins off the pavement. The team fell silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. Forensics would confirm later, but in that moment, the truth was already clear. This stain was old, very old. Old enough to belong to 1995, old enough to belong to Elena. Yet something was off. The staining pattern suggested the blood originated about 6 feet to the left of where it pooled, meaning the body or attacker had moved. Maybe dragged, maybe carried, maybe attacked in one spot and collapsed in another. But the alley's layout didn't fit the trajectory perfectly. The 3-foot wide gap between the wall and a fixed pipe would have made it difficult for an adult to move freely, unless they knew exactly what they were doing, unless they rehearsed, unless they had done it before. As the team stepped back to photograph the scene, Harris noticed something glinting near the pipe, a tiny metallic object wedged deep in the crack between concrete slabs. He used tweezers to extract it. The shape was small, curved with a thin layer of rust. When the grime was wiped away, the object revealed itself under flashlight. A fingernail clip, metal, old, edges sharp. But that wasn't what made Harris freeze. There was a faint trace of dried blood along its edge. And underneath that, embedded so deep it required magnification, was a single blonde hair. Elena had dark brown hair. The strand did not belong to her, which meant someone else bled here. Someone else left DNA behind. Someone possibly connected to her disappearance. Someone who might still be alive. The discovery fractured the case open like a crack, splitting ice. For the first time, physical evidence suggested more than one person had been involved in the alley that night. And if Crane moved evidence years later, perhaps that second person remained in Seattle, buried in its fabric, masked by normalcy, blending into the city's pulse without leaving ripples. Rain grew heavier, pattering against the tarps and equipment, as if the sky was trying to wash away the truth again. But the truth stayed. The luminol glow faded slowly, like dying embers. The team gathered samples, sealed vials, documented every angle. By sunrise, the alley returned to stillness, its secrets exposed for the first time in decades. At the lab, results came faster than expected. The blood beneath the pallet was human. Type O. Same as Elena, not definitive, but consistent. The hair strand, however, was confirmed as belonging to a male mid-20s to early 30 as European ancestry. The DNA was partial too degraded for CODIS to provide a direct match, but it offered a genetic profile, a starting point, a shape of someone investigators never knew existed. Harris stared at the report mind-racing. If Crane acted alone, why was there another person's DNA at the scene? If Crane didn't act alone, who helped him? And why had the partner never surfaced, never been questioned, never ended up in any file? Unless the partner wasn't a suspect in 1995, unless they were someone invisible, someone the investigation never noticed because they never had reason to look at them. Someone who could walk the same streets today without raising a single eyebrow. The digital team enhanced the final frames of the Polaroid. They isolated the edge of a sleeve, magnified the stitching, analyzed fiber texture. The algorithm compared it with archived clothing catalogs from the 90s. The result pointed toward a brand sold cheaply in street markets downtown, nothing unique, nothing traceable. But then the software highlighted something else, something subtle, a shape partly visible in the blurred background, a reflection, a vehicle's window, a faint outline of a license plate. Half a number, faded, distorted, but still something. Harris felt it again, that shift in his chest when pieces begin to breathe, begin to align, begin to demand attention. The cold case wasn't cold anymore. It was awake. It was angry. And the person who planted these clues was leading them somewhere step by step, inch by inch, pulling them deeper into a maze crafted long before they ever realized they were walking in it. And in the quiet hum of the evidence room with rain ticking softly against the windows, Harris couldn't shake the sensation that Seattle wasn't just hiding answers. Seattle was hiding someone who knew they were being hunted. Someone who was already one move ahead. The discovery of the half-visible license plate pulled detectives into a new current, a direction that felt both promising and treacherous, like stepping onto a frozen lake without knowing where the thin ice lay. Analysts worked around the clock, enhancing the reflection from the Polaroid until the numbers sharpened just enough to offer faint clarity. 3 digits, 1 letter. The rest lost to distortion. But even fragments can disrupt the stillness of a cold case. Even fragments can lead somewhere. The plate was traced to vehicles registered in Washington during the mid-90s, a cross-reference that produced a list of 217 possible matches, too many to chase all at once, too many to ignore. Harris ordered a sweep owner's past addresses, criminal records connections to Pioneer Square jobs that operated near the alley. Patterns emerged slowly, like shapes rising through fog. One name looped back into focus: Thomas Reddick, a delivery driver whose nightly routes included Pioneer Square in 1995. He had been issued a citation for illegal parking the same week Elena vanished. His record was quiet, almost too quiet, a surface polished smooth by time. He moved out of Seattle in 1998, resurfacing sporadically in rental agreements across Oregon. No arrests, no violent history, no red flags that screamed danger, but sometimes the people who hide best are the ones who never leave prints on anything. Detectives fanned out to look for him, but before they could make contact, another piece of the puzzle surfaced, uninvited, unannounced, perfectly timed to deepen the unease already spreading through the precinct. A letter arrived at the station addressed not to the department, not to any unit, but to Detective Michael Harris specifically. The handwriting was unmistakable. The same jagged strokes from the lockbox note, the same tilted slant, the same sense of urgency bleeding through every curve. The envelope had no return address, no postal markings. It had been dropped directly into the station's lobby mailbox sometime in the early hours of the morning. Inside was a single sheet of paper and nothing more. 4 words again, but different this time. You missed something else. Underneath the message was a hand-drawn map, rough abstract, a minimal outline of streets converging near the waterfront. A circle marked a specific location. No labels, no coordinates, just a target. The map matched the soil analysis from the torn fabric in the lockbox, the area behind the warehouse district. A stretch of land now fenced off for redevelopment where old structures leaned like forgotten giants, and the smell of salt water clung to every rusted surface. Harris didn't wait. He gathered his team and drove to the waterfront headlights, slicing through mist as gulls circled overhead in restless spirals. The warehouse loomed dark and empty, its once busy loading docks now splintered and overgrown with weeds. The chain-link fence clattered in the wind as officers clipped it open and stepped inside flashlights, fanning out over cracked asphalt and puddles reflecting the dull glow of street lamps. The circled area on the map led them behind the warehouse to a concrete slab half sunken into the ground, its edges fractured like an old scar. Something was beneath it, something the sender wanted them to find. But the slab was thick, heavy, immovable, without machinery. Construction crews were called in engines rumbling through the night as hydraulic jacks forced the concrete upward inch by agonizing inch. The smell hit them first. Cold, stagnant, earthy. An odor that rose from deep underground, the kind that clung to memory long after it hit the air. Beneath the slab was a narrow cavity, roughly the size of a shallow grave, but not shaped like one. It was more like a storage recess, an old drainage pocket, sealed decades earlier. And inside that pocket, illuminated by the narrow beam of a flashlight, lay a bundle wrapped tightly in tar-stained plastic, the edges bound with twine that disintegrated the moment officers tried to touch it. When they unwrapped the bundle, silence descended like a heavy curtain. Inside were Elena's belongings. Her wallet, her student ID, her watch with the cracked face she always meant to repair, the neon strap she used for her keys, a pair of earrings her roommate had given her for her birthday, items that should have vanished in 1995, items that should never have been here. But there was something else, another envelope, waterproof, carefully sealed, the same handwriting. This time it contained a photograph of Elena. Not the smiling portrait from her missing person posters, not an image scraped from her apartment, but a different angle, a candid shot, taken without her knowing. She was walking down a street holding a cup of coffee, looking away from the camera. The timestamp printed on the lower corner, though nearly faded, was unmistakable. 2 days before she disappeared, the person who sent this photo had been watching her, following her, documenting her movements. This wasn't random. This wasn't impulsive. This was orchestrated. Harris felt his pulse drum in his ears. The air around him pressed tighter, as though the walls of the warehouse were leaning in, listening. Whoever left the envelope had access to the site. Recent access. The dirt on the slab was disturbed. Footprints, faint but present, circled the area. One set. Heavy, deliberate, deep enough to show someone of significant weight, or someone carrying something. They cast the prints, photographed the measured depth and width. The stride was consistent with a tall adult male, late 30s to mid-40s. Too old to be Crane, who died 14 years earlier. Too old for many names on the list, but not too old for Reddick. The connection tightened like wire. They checked nearby cameras. Most were inactive, either broken or angled away from the warehouse. But a single security camera on a neighboring building captured a blurry figure entering the fenced area the night before. Tall, hooded, moving with purpose, no face visible, but the posture, shoulders forward, head lowered, matched the silhouette in the Polaroid. While analysts processed footage, Harris ordered a search of Reddick's last known residence. The house was dark, abandoned for months. Dust drifting through the cracked windows like pale ghosts. Mail piled at the door. No signs of life. But in the garage, beneath a tarp covered in grime, officers uncovered an old delivery van, white rust spreading along its panels like a slow infection. The plate was missing, but the mounting bracket bore faint scratches identical in spacing to the half-visible numbers enhanced from the Polaroid. The van was a match. Inside, the scent of damp fabric and stale gasoline mixed in a suffocating blend. Officers swept the seats, the dashboard, the glove compartment. Most surfaces were bare, too bare, wiped clean deliberately. But people make mistakes, even those who believe they are untouchable. Under the passenger seat, lodged between the carpet and the metal frame, they found a piece of torn paper, half a receipt from a store that no longer existed. The date printed on it was from 1995, the time 11:09 p.m. Elena vanished around 11:15. The timestamp alone wasn't proof, but it placed the van, it placed the driver, it placed someone in the right time frame with no explanation. And then, deeper in the back of the van, a loose panel revealed something far more disturbing. A stack of Polaroids, rubber-banded, hidden, preserved. Dozens of them. Elena in different locations. Elena leaving work. Elena locking her apartment door. Elena buying groceries. Elena sitting on a bus, staring out the window with that distant expression people wear when lost in thought. She had been followed for weeks, studied, stalked, photographed with the same quiet obsession that lined every step of this renewed investigation. And yet something felt wrong. Something didn't measure correctly. If Reddick was the stalker, why hide the evidence so sloppily? Why bury the lockbox years later? Why plant new evidence now? Why send letters? Why reveal clues strategically? Unless someone else held the camera. Unless someone else kept the photos. Unless Reddick wasn't the mastermind, but the shadow following instructions, doing someone else's bidding, playing a role in a story written by another hand. As technicians spread the photographs across the table in the precinct, Harris's eyes narrowed on the final image pulled from the van. It was a picture of Elena standing beside a street post, her posture tense, her eyes looking to the left at something out of frame. Something or someone she noticed. Something or someone that frightened her enough to stiffen her shoulders and tighten her jaw. Behind her, almost hidden, reflected faintly in a storefront window, was the shape of another figure. Not Reddick. Someone taller. Someone broader. Someone who watched the camera, watching her. Someone who had been there the whole time. Someone whose reflection appeared so faint that without magnification it looked like nothing more than a blur. But it wasn't a blur. It was a person. A second presence in the shadows. A ghost the investigation had never seen. A ghost returning after 20 years to pull detectives deeper into the maze he never left. The faint reflection of the second figure transformed the precinct into a hive of restless energy, every mind working, every instinct alive, every quiet breath carrying the weight of something old, awakening beneath the surface. Detectives stared at the magnified image on the monitor, the shape behind Elena barely more than a silhouette in the ghosted glass, yet undeniably human. Broad shoulders, tall posture, a faint tilt of the head that suggested deliberate surveillance. Though the image lacked clarity, its presence alone shifted the gravitational pull of the investigation. If Reddick was the man who followed Elena, this second figure was the one who watched everything, the one who hid behind watchful eyes and reflective surfaces. A voyeur who understood distance angles, darkness. Someone who never wanted to be seen, yet always positioned himself close enough to observe every detail. For the first time, the narrative of 1995 fractured. Elena wasn't stalked by one man. She wasn't taken by a lone predator. There were two shadows in the alleys of Pioneer Square the night she vanished. Two sets of eyes, two presences softly echoing behind her steps, two forces moving with separate motives, or perhaps a single intention shared between them. As analysis continued, Harris felt the cold, familiar sensation of a truth adjusting itself into place, like tumblers clicking in a lock. If Reddick was a follower, the second man was a watcher, someone who allowed Reddick to act, someone who orchestrated the flow of events, someone who knew how to blend into crowds, how to hide behind reflective glass, how to observe without imprinting on the scene. Someone dangerous not because he attacked, but because he waited. The precinct's digital unit pushed the enhancement software to its limits, though every pass over the reflection created more questions than answers. The outlines refused to sharpen, as if the figure existed between frames of reality, slipping through the edges of the lens. The reflection was distorted by the curvature of the glass, widened, slightly blurring proportions. It could be anyone. It could be no one. But it wasn't Reddick, and that alone fired a spark inside Harris's mind. In the quiet hours of the morning, as rain streaked down the windows of the precinct like white scratches, Harris pinned the Polaroids on the board, each image a fragment of a surveillance pipeline that followed Elena without her ever knowing. He traced patterns, repeated locations, repeated timings, angles captured from different vantage points. Someone had predicted her routes, anticipated her decisions. Someone who studied her habits with precision. And not all the photos came from the same angle. Different lenses, different heights, different distances. Two photographers, two perspectives. The realization landed like a weight against his chest. This wasn't a single stalker grooming his victim. This was coordination, a team, a pair, a partnership rooted in something more methodical, more sinister, more tightly bound than chance encounters. Whether for thrill compulsion control or something the investigation had yet to grasp, the crime was never the work of a solitary figure lurking in the dark. It was a duet played in silence, and one of those players was still conducting from the shadows. A break emerged when analysts ran geometric pattern recognition against the reflection in the window, focusing not on the man himself, but on the background behind him, the shape of a neon sign, the curvature of a storefront logo, the faint outline of a hanging banner. By isolating those shapes, the software traced the photo's origin to a single intersection in 1995 3rd Avenue and Pine near an old pawn shop that had since closed. Detectives returned to the location now, a street peppered with new businesses, remodeled storefronts, security cameras that didn't exist decades ago. But the architecture, the bone structure of the street remained. Harris stood at the exact angle the photo must have been taken from. He paced backward, forward, sideways, finding the line of sight, finding the vantage point the watcher used. It was elevated, slightly above head height, perhaps leaning on a railing, perhaps standing on a step, perhaps perched on the shadowed entryway of a building that now held a laundromat. He scanned the area until something clicked into place, a narrow alcove between two buildings barely noticeable unless one looked for it. Hidden from the sidewalk, sheltered by overhangs, dark even during midday. A perfect place to watch, a perfect place to disappear. Harris stepped into the alcove, the air shifted, cold, still. He imagined someone standing there 2 decades earlier, camera in hand, eyes sharp breath, slow. He imagined Elena unknowingly stepping into frame, glancing towards something that unsettled her. He imagined the silent coordination, one man following her the other, monitoring from a distance, like hunters corralling their prey. He searched the ground, the cracks in the wall, the rusted fire escape ladder. Something metallic flashed near the corner. Beneath a layer of grime, a small brass washer, flattened slightly with a notch in one side. Not remarkable, not incriminating. But when he held it up to the light, details emerged, faint circular indentations, consistent with tripod mounts, remnants of equipment. Whoever stalked Elena used more than handheld cameras. He used gear, professional gear. Back at the station, while technicians cataloged the washer, Harris dug through employment listings from the mid-90s photography studios, freelance photographers, camera rental services. He extracted every name that had an address near Pioneer Square or 3rd and Pine during that era. The list was long. Too long. But then a smaller list surfaced, individuals reported for suspicious behavior around women in public spaces, complaints filed but never prosecuted, notes buried in archives. Among them, one name stood out. Caleb Holt, camera shop assistant, amateur photographer, lived in a studio apartment 3 blocks from Elena's workplace, fired twice for inappropriate conduct, questioned in 1993 for following a woman home after photographing her in Volunteer Park, never charged, drifted between jobs, eventually disappeared from records in 2002. There was no photo of him from the 90s, just a brief description. 6'2", slender build, dark hair, quiet demeanor. The kind of man who rarely made eye contact. The kind of man who watched instead of speaking. The kind of man who would stand in an alcove with a camera while someone else approached the target. Harris ordered a search for Holt's documents, old rental records, possible forwarding addresses. But the trail blurred as though Holt had evaporated from the city. No confirmed death, no confirmed relocation. Just a man who slipped through cracks, leaving faint fingerprints on the edges of incidents without ever being caught. As the investigation widened, a new development shook the room. Lab results from the fingernail clip found in the alley came back. The blonde hair trapped beneath the rusted metal did not belong to Elena. It did not belong to Reddick. It did not match any DNA in the criminal database. But the degradation pattern revealed something unusual. The hair had been shed, not cut, torn out during physical struggle. The follicle root was damaged, indicating force. The blood residue on the clip, once compared with the stain beneath the pallet, revealed 2 distinct profiles. 2 people bled in that alley 20 years ago. One, likely Elena, the other, unknown. But the mixture ratio suggested the second person was injured enough to bleed on the ground. If the unknown man was Holt, he hadn't just watched. He had been at the scene, and he had bled. Night swallowed the city as detectives pieced together the growing mosaic of shadows. Every revelation added complexity. Every clue pointed toward a web woven by someone meticulous, patient, obsessed. The tone of the recent letters, the handwriting, the angle of the taunts felt personal, intimate, like someone speaking not just to the police, but specifically to Harris. Someone who knew when the case files would be reviewed, when the construction site would be searched, when investigators would return to Pioneer Square. Someone aware of every step the police were taking. Someone who walked the same roads in silence. Someone who still lived in Seattle. At 2:17 a.m., just as Harris leaned over the evidence board, a call came in from dispatch. A report. Anonymous. A voice distorted by static and wind. Just one sentence. "You're looking at the wrong man." Then the line went dead. Harris felt the cold settle into his bones. Someone was watching the investigation unfold in real time. Someone who knew what they were discovering. Someone steering them maybe away from the truth, maybe toward it, maybe both. But then something struck him with sudden clarity. If Holt bled at the crime scene, where were his medical records? Where were the hospital reports? Urgent care visits, stitches, broken skin. No one suffers a wound that deep without treatment. Unless they treat it themselves. Unless they knew how. Unless they had a place to hide where no one asked questions. A memory surfaced faint like a whisper lost between years. A clinic. A tiny unregistered word-of-mouth backroom clinic in 1995 run by a man who patched up street workers, runaways, drifters, anyone who didn't want a paper trail. shut down in 2000. The doctor, never licensed, disappeared after an investigation. If someone like Holt sought medical help, he would have gone there. And if he did, records might still exist. Hidden, forgotten, locked away. Somewhere no one had looked. Somewhere waiting. The maze deepened, the air tightened, the shadows grew taller, and the truth felt closer than ever yet, still drifting just out of reach like a silhouette, in a reflection watching quietly from the other side of the glass. The search for the vanished backroom clinic began before dawn, when the sky still hung heavy, with the faded bruise of night, and the city lights blinked like tired sentinels, watching a world that refused to sleep. Detectives sifted through archives, old newspapers, zoning records, property deeds, hoping to locate a building that had existed in the shadows, tolerated quietly by those who needed it, ignored by those who didn't. The clinic never advertised, never filed reports, never kept electronic documents. It operated somewhere between rumor and necessity, treating wounds no hospital wanted to explain and closing its door to questions that required police involvement. Detective Harris traced the whispers. In the mid-90s, the unlicensed clinic had been rumored to sit behind a laundromat on Rainier Avenue disguised as a storage room. In another version, it operated beneath a sports bar using the basement to perform stitches and remove bullets. A third rumor said it moved locations, often shifting like a ghost whenever authorities got too close. But one piece remained consistent in every retelling: the doctor was a man who accepted cash silence and secrecy as the only currency he trusted. Harris drove through Rainier Valley as the morning fog curled low across the asphalt, wrapping the streets in a haze that distorted shapes and softened edges. He passed rows of aging storefronts, barbershops with peeling paint, grocery stores with flickering signs, restaurants still closed with chairs stacked on tables. The neighborhood held memories in its bones, layers of stories pressed under decades of pavement, some forgotten, some waiting to resurface. At 6:12 a.m., he stepped inside a laundromat whose sign buzzed faintly, illuminating a row of old machines humming like metallic hearts. The owner, an elderly woman with sharp eyes, watched him from behind the counter. She recognized the badge instantly, but said nothing, waiting for questions she clearly didn't want to answer. Harris showed her the photograph of the fingernail clip, then the Polaroid reflection, then the torn strap from the lockbox. She stared at the evidence, eyes, narrowing lips, tightening before finally exhaling in resignation. "People forget," she said in a low voice, "but buildings remember. Walls remember. They keep things even when everyone else lets them go." When asked about the clinic, her gaze drifted to a narrow hallway at the back of the laundromat. There was a room, she admitted quietly. Not mine, never mine. But it existed. People came at night, mostly men, sometimes bleeding, sometimes scared, sometimes both. She led Harris down the hallway, stopping at a metal door rusted around the hinges. It hadn't been opened in years. The lock snapped easily, the smell of stale air rushing out like the breath of something buried alive. Inside lay a small windowless room. One metal chair, one table, a scattering of old gauze wrappers and bottles long emptied. The faint, bitter scent of antiseptic still clung to the walls, as if the room had been sealed moments ago instead of decades earlier. Dust coated the floor in uneven layers, disturbed only by the occasional paw prints of rats or stray cats. Harris knelt, flashlight sweeping over the floor. A small stain darkened the concrete near the wall, too old to analyze, too smeared by time. But the shape of it, elongated, narrow, trailing toward the door, reminded him of the spray pattern in the alley. Blood follows gravity. Blood tells stories. Then he saw a scrap of paper wedged beneath a metal cabinet. Yellowed, fragile, nearly disintegrating. He fished it out carefully. It was a patient intake form, unofficial, handwritten, nothing legally binding. Only first names were listed. 4 names. The 4th was smudged, but the 3rd, Caleb. Next to it, laceration to left forearm, deep, required 6 stitches. Dated June 3rd, 1995. 10 days before Eleni vanished. A chill crawled under Harris's skin. Holt had been injured before the disappearance, not after. If the blood found in the alley belonged to him, it might not be from the night Elena vanished. It could have been from something else entirely. A fight, an accident. Another victim. Another crime never reported. The timeline fractured, the assumptions bent. If Holt wasn't injured during Elena's attack, then who bled in the alley? And whose hair was caught in the clip? As Harris exited the room, tension tightened like a noose around his thoughts. He scanned the laundromat again, letting his instincts sift through the smallest details, the placement of machines, the worn corners of walls, the faint sense that something else lingered. Behind the last row of washers, tucked between two cracked tiles, something metallic caught his eye. He slid his hand behind the machine and pulled out a small, rusted container no larger than a matchbox. It rattled with the unmistakable clink of metal against metal. When opened, it revealed 3 items: a bent sewing needle, a small razor blade scorching with rust, and a black and white photograph folded tightly into a small square. Harris unfolded it. The breath left him. It was Elena, but younger. High school age, wearing a backpack, walking across a street in Spokane, the city where her parents lived. Her disappearance wasn't random. The stalking didn't begin in Seattle. Someone had followed her long before she moved. Someone tracked her childhood. This was obsession born early, not in 1995, years earlier. If Holt had this photo, why hide it here? The laundromat owner confirmed Holt never visited the clinic location. She had never seen him. The container must have been left by someone else, someone connected to the clinic, someone who knew the hidden room, someone who used the same old building as a dead drop. The obsession deepened, the puzzle darkened. Back at the precinct, the forensics team analyzed the rusted razor. Trace residue on its edge contained 2 types of blood, the older degraded profile matching the unknown male from the alley, and a second more recent trace, too faint to identify. The needle carried no fingerprints, only traces of old skin cells, too degraded to extract. The photograph's development style matched the Polaroids from Reddick's van, but subtle differences revealed something else. The high school image of Elena was taken with a different camera, a different lens, older, a model no longer produced by 1995, which meant the watcher wasn't new. He'd watched her for years, evolving his tools as he evolved his methods. Reddick was a pawn. Holt was a piece, but someone else held the board. As the investigation spiraled down this new vein, a call came from an officer reviewing old interviews. He found something unusual in the original missing person file, a name scribbled faintly in the margin of a transcript, as if noted by a rookie officer who wasn't sure whether to consider it important. The name was barely legible, but with enhancement it revealed itself. Elijah H. The transcript it appeared beside described a witness who heard footsteps running away from the alley after the scream. The officer wrote the initials but never followed up. No contact information, no address, no description. Elijah H. The combination meant nothing at first, but then when Harris looked again at the intake form from the clinic, Caleb listed third. The smudged fourth name suddenly made sense. It wasn't smudged. It was incomplete. Only the first letter remained clear: H. Next to it, the initials of the wound type LA left arm, same as Holt's. 2 patients treated that night. 2 injuries. 2 men at the clinic. Both bleeding. Both desperate enough to hide their identities. The second name, Elijah H., had been here. Not a rumor. Not a witness. A patient. A man with a wound. A man connected to Holt. A man whose incomplete name resurfaced in the missing person file as a ghost entry. A man with no digital footprint from 1995. A man who watched from reflections. A man who still moved in the city like a phantom. Lab results returned one final detail: the degraded DNA from the razor-matched partial markers found on the envelope in the warehouse. The same donor, the same hands. Elijah wasn't just present. Elijah was recent, alive, active, moving, watching. The realization hit Harris with the force of a cold wave. Reddick was only the distraction. Holt was only the lens. But Elijah was the one who orchestrated every buried clue, every misdirection, every taunt written in jagged handwriting. Elijah was the reason the case was never solved. Elijah was the one who wanted it reopened. Elijah was the one still out there. And as the final lab report printed, the lights in the precinct flickered twice before stabilizing. Outside in the rain-washed street, a figure stood beneath a flickering lamppost. Tall, broad-shouldered, unmoving, watching the building. Watching the people inside, watching Harris through the glass. Then, as if acknowledging the chase had only just begun, the figure vanished into the fog. The moment the figure disappeared into the fog outside the precinct, an unspoken tension rippled through the building, a silent alarm triggered not by sound but by instinct. Detectives walked faster, spoke quieter, looked over their shoulders as though the shadows themselves had grown eyes. Harris stood near the window for a long time, staring at the spot where the silhouette had been moments earlier, tall, broad, watching. The same outline captured in the reflection behind Elena 20 years ago. The same shape hinted at in the alley. The same entity that seemed to appear and vanish with unsettling precision, like a ghost that knew exactly when to reveal itself and when to fade into the seams of the city. But ghosts don't taunt investigators. Ghosts don't bleed. Ghosts don't leave razor blades, Polaroids, and handwritten threats. Elijah H. wasn't dead. He wasn't hiding. He was choosing his moments, and now he was close. Too close. Harris turned from the window and ordered a full sweep of the exterior. Officers moved into the fog-drenched streets, flashlights cutting through mist. The pavement glistened with fresh rain reflecting light in shifting pools. No footprints, no traces. The figure vanished cleanly, the way someone does when they know the blind spots of the block, when they understand patrol patterns, when they've memorized the slow rhythm between camera rotations and the narrow alleys that swallow movement whole. The city felt suddenly complicit its alleys, too dark, its corners too quiet, its windows too reflective, as if every surface helped the phantom slip through without leaving evidence. Back inside the precinct, hummed with the frenzy of new information, Harris gathered his team around the evidence board. The lines connecting Crane Reddick-Holt and Elijah looked less like names and more like a pattern, a network drawn across decades with threads leading inexorably toward the one man who had never been interviewed, never been seen clearly, never existed on any official record. Elijah had always been a shadow moving behind people whose names were real enough to draw suspicion, letting them absorb the weight of the crimes while he remained untouched in the background. A surgeon of invisibility, a curator of misdirection, a ghost whose hands shaped the cold case from the very beginning. The evidence suggested multiple locations. Elijah had used the warehouse, the alley, the clinic room, but none felt like his home. None had the imprint of someone who lived there, no personal items, no traceable fingerprints, no objects belonging to a life outside the crime. He wasn't rooted. He drifted. But even drifters leave patterns. Late that afternoon, an analyst hurried toward Harris with a sheet of printed data, something unusual found within the metadata of the USB video. Though most timestamps were stripped, one fragment remained buried in the compression layer, a GPS coordinate. It wasn't exact, only 3 digits of latitude survived, but it was something. The partial coordinate pointed toward an industrial zone south of downtown near old rail lines and abandoned storage lots, the kind of place where ghosts take shape. The team split into 2 vehicles and headed to the site. The sky was a dull gray bruise, heavy with the threat of more rain. Train tracks stretched toward the horizon like old scars. The industrial lots were graveyards of forgotten machinery. Rusted cranes toppled barrel storage units with padlocks corroded into orange crust. The coordinate fragment led them to a narrow lane between 2 warehouses, their metal siding groaning softly in the wind. It smelled of steel oil and rain-soaked dust, a scent that clung to memory like a warning. The alleyway ended at a row of storage units, each identical, except for small, faded numbers. Harris approached Unit 39, noticing the faint scrape marks near the lock, the kind left by someone who opened and closed it recently, someone using gloves, someone careful. The lock clicked open after a single twist of a bolt cutter. The door rolled upward with a metallic shriek. Inside was darkness, thick, suffocating, the kind that feels alive. Flashlights swept through the interior. A chair, a table, a portable floodlight, a tripod, and in the corner, a wall covered in photographs. Dozens of them, some black and white, some Polaroids, some printed from digital files, all arranged meticulously, all showing Elena, at school, at coffee shops, walking alone, smiling with friends, sitting on a bus, leaving her apartment. Every phase of her young life captured from a distance, each image recorded by someone who watched with predatory devotion. But there were more. Photos of other women, 14 in total, some from the 80s, some from the early 2000s. Different ages, different faces, different cities, different disappearances. All cold cases, all still unsolved. And in the center of the wall, pinned with 4 rusted nails, was a map of Seattle. Red string crisscrossed between dates, times, locations. Pins marked alleyways, bus stops, grocery stores, train stations, an intricate web of movement. Elijah had been doing this for decades, not just to Elena, to anyone who fit a pattern only he understood. This wasn't a man with a single obsession. He was a collector, a curator of fear, a predator who stalked lives from their beginnings, watching them unfold like stories written for him alone. As the team examined the photos, a new horror surfaced. Not all images were old. Some were recent, very recent, taken within the last 6 months. And among them, in the bottom corner of the board, was a photograph dated just 2 weeks earlier. It was the laundromat owner, watching from behind her counter. Another photo showed a detective from Harris's team parking her car near the precinct. Another captured Harris himself, standing in the alley where they found the second container. His eyes widened, his jaw clenched. Elijah wasn't just watching the victims. He was watching the investigators, studying them, tracking them, following them the same way he followed Elena. This was no longer a case. This was a hunt. Harris felt a shift in the air, something electric, something cold, seconds before one of the officers called out from the back of the storage unit. "Sir, you need to see this." He approached slowly. There, placed neatly on the ground, as if waiting for him, was a small cassette tape recorder, old, gray, scuffed around the edges. A piece of masking tape across the top read only one word, "Sinidot." "Listen." Harris pressed play. Static hissed. Then a voice low, calm, disturbingly steady, flowed through the speaker like a whisper gliding across skin. "You finally found the gallery," the voice said, "but you're seeing it too late." A pause, a breath, a faint sound of something shifting in the background. "I chose Elena because she was perfect, always moving, always alone, always looking over her shoulder." Another pause. "She wasn't my first. She wasn't my last." Harris felt his grip tighten around the recorder. "You've been following the wrong trails, detective. Holt was weak. Reddick was sloppy. Crane was a diversion. You chase ghosts while the real story walks past you every day." The voice grew quieter, more intimate. "I've watched you too. You're more predictable than you think. You go where I want you to go. You see what I want you to see." Then a single sentence delivered with chilling softness. "You missed the most important photograph." The tape clicked off. Harris spun toward the photo wall, scanning image after image, tracing strings, dates, faces, locations, looking for the clue hidden behind Elijah's calm threat. Then he saw it. A photo almost hidden behind others, smaller, slightly out of alignment. He pulled it free. His breath caught. It wasn't a victim. It wasn't a witness. It wasn't Elena. It was a photograph taken through a window. His apartment window. He was in the frame, sleeping on the couch, unaware that a camera lens watched him through the night, documenting him the way victims were documented before they vanished. The back of the photo held a single, jagged line of handwriting. "You don't understand the ending yet." The room fell silent. A chill settled deeper than fear. This wasn't a killer revisiting old crimes. This was a killer expanding the story. And Harris realized with brutal clarity, Elijah wasn't trying to hide from the investigation. He was leading it, shaping it, directing it, like a conductor guiding an orchestra through movements only he understood. And the final movement had already begun. The photograph of Harris sleeping sat in his hand like a live wire buzzing with implications too heavy to absorb all at once. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale glow on the storage unit's metallic walls, but everything felt dimmer, more distant, as if reality itself had taken a step back to make room for something darker. Officers moved around him with tense precision, cataloging evidence, sealing photographs, documenting each twisted detail of Elijah's gallery. But their voices blurred, drowned beneath the pounding of Harris's heartbeat as he stared at the image that stripped away any illusion of distance between hunter and hunted. Elijah had stood outside his home, watched him, photographed him, entered the silent hours of his life without leaving a sound. And if he'd done it once, he could have done it 100 times. Could have been in the hallway, on the stairwell, behind the door, watching Harris breathe, watching him sleep, watching him try to solve a case that Elijah had written, edited, rewritten, and orchestrated long before Harris even reopened the file. Harris lowered the photo, slowly forcing his mind back into motion before fear could carve deeper roots. He studied the edges, the grain, the angle. Taken from the street through a narrow gap between curtains. The timestamp at the corner barely visible was from 12 nights ago. Elijah had been in his neighborhood barely a week before the first lockbox was unearthed. This wasn't coincidence. This was choreography. He slipped the photo into an evidence sleeve and left the storage unit needing air that wasn't saturated with Elijah's presence. Outside mist swirled across the gravel, clinging to his shoes, the cold biting sharper than before. Officers taped the entrance, sealed Unit 39, and began canvassing the industrial zone. But Harris knew Elijah wouldn't be here. He wasn't careless. He didn't linger. He planted what he wanted, discovered, then drifted elsewhere into new shadows, new corners, new lines of sight. Back at the precinct, tension coiled through every hallway. Officers whispered updates, analysts raced between screens, and a sense of creeping urgency thickened the air. The gallery images revealed a timeline of stalking that spanned decades. Holt captured victims from the front, Reddick captured victims from behind, and Elijah captured everyone from angles no one noticed, from viewpoints so distant and subtle they could be mistaken for chance. He was the architect, a phantom who knew how to dissolve into crowds and reappear behind someone like a shifting reflection on wet pavement. The chalkboard wall of the precinct slowly transformed into a maze, names, dates, maps, pins, patterns, but the center was always the same, a faceless silhouette, marked only with the initials EH. Harris stared at it for a long moment before ordering a full background sweep for anyone in Washington with those initials who had lived near Spokane, Rainier Valley, or downtown Seattle during the 80s and 90s. The list was shorter than expected 11 names. 8 eliminated for age or location. 2 eliminated for death records. 1 remained, a man named Elijah Harrow. No criminal record, no employment history after 1997. Last known address, a rundown duplex near the outskirts of Tacoma. The landlord's notes indicated he paid in cash, moved out without notice, left the room clean to clean. No belongings, no fingerprints, no trace that a human had ever lived there. Just a single object left behind in the closet, a camera strap, black, frayed at the edges, the same brand as the strap found in the lockbox. Detectives drove to Tacoma immediately, but the duplex was empty now, boarded up the paint, peeling the yard overgrown. The landlord's memory was vague, a tall man, thin, quiet, never spoke more than a few words, never had visitors, never caused trouble, seemed like a man who didn't want to exist. Inside the room, dust coated the floor like a second skin. Harris scanned every corner, every crack, every uneven plank in the floorboards. Something felt wrong, not in what he saw, but in what he didn't see. Ghosts leave traces. But Elijah erased his own shadow. Then something clicked. Harris knelt near the heater, where a small grate hung crooked. The screws loosened. Inside, wrapped in a layer of old cloth, was a small stack of index cards. Each card carried a name, a date, a location, a pattern, a list of women starting from the 1980s. Some names matched open cold cases, some matched missing person reports, and at the bottom of the stack was a card with no name at all, only a date written in black ink, June 15th, 1995. The night Elena vanished? No name. Because she wasn't chosen at random. She was the culmination, the one he watched the longest. And beside the date was a single symbol, a circle with a slash through it, a mark repeated across other cards, some circled, some crossed out entirely. Elijah was tracking his own crimes with the precision of an archivist. But one card stood out, not crossed, not circled, just marked with a single red line, a date 4 weeks from today. A chilling realization slid through Harris's thoughts like a blade. Elijah wasn't done. He had another target, another victim, already chosen, already watched, already marked on the timeline. And if Elijah was following the same pattern, photographing, stalking, studying, then somewhere in the city, a woman was being watched right now, completely unaware. Harris raced back to Seattle, summoning the team. Names from recent missing person calls were compared. Emergency reports. 911 tips. Anything unusual from the last 2 weeks. Most leads fizzled. But then one officer brought forward a detail from a neighborhood watch report filed just days ago. An anonymous woman reported a man standing outside her apartment every night for 3 days, always in the same spot, always watching her window. Patrol cars were sent after the second report, but the man vanished. Her name wasn't included in the file, but the address was. Harris drove there himself. An apartment building in Capitol Hill, old brick facade, ivy creeping across the walls, yellow light spilled from a few windows, but most were dark the night, settling in like a heavy blanket. He climbed the stairs to the listed apartment and knocked. A young woman answered, startled at first, then calmer when she saw the badge. Her voice trembled slightly when she explained that yes, a man had been watching her window, tall, heavy coat, face hidden by a hood. She thought it was a prowler, a voyeur, a random stranger. She didn't know the truth that she was on Elijah's list. She didn't know a red line marked her fate. She didn't know she was being folded into a pattern 20 years in the making. Her apartment overlooked a narrow street. Across from it stood a vacant building with shattered windows and a fire escape warped from years of neglect. Harris stepped out onto her balcony, scanning the angles, tracing the line from the window to the street below. He saw it instantly, the perfect vantage point, a place where someone could stand in the dark without being noticed, watching her through the curtains, just as he once watched Elena. The street was quiet, the fog thick, the silence palpable. Then Harris saw something. A faint footprint in the dirt by the curb. Large, fresh, too fresh. He followed the trail across the street, pacing slowly, listening to the rhythm of the night. The scent of damp concrete filled his lungs. The fog swallowed his outline. Every sound felt amplified, the distant hum of a car, the groan of a dumpster shifting in the wind. Another footprint appeared behind the dumpster. Then another, leading into a narrow alley. Harris raised his flashlight and stepped forward. The beam cut through the fog and illuminated something small lying on the ground, a folded piece of paper. He opened it slowly. Inside, written in that same jagged, slanted handwriting, was a single sentence. "You're late, detective." A noise echoed deeper in the alley, soft, deliberate, like a footstep taken slowly enough to be heard only if someone was truly listening. Harris's pulse surged. He lifted the flashlight and caught the silhouette of a tall figure standing at the far end of the alley, partially shrouded by fog. Still, watching, unmoving. And then the silhouette stepped backward into darkness and vanished, not fleeing, not panicked, just retreating, as if inviting Harris to follow, as if the next chapter of the cold case was unfolding exactly as Elijah intended. The alley swallowed the silhouette as easily as a deep river, claiming a stone, silent, seamless, without a ripple to betray the descent. Harris stood frozen for a fraction of a second, the damp air clinging to his skin, the fog pressing inward like a closing fist. Every instinct screamed danger, but another voice, sharper, colder, pushed him forward. He stepped deeper into the alley, past piles of broken pallets, past the rusted dumpster, past the paper note that still fluttered faintly in his coat pocket. His breath fogged in the air as he moved, each exhale sounding louder than it should have, as if the silence around him was swallowing every other sound. Elijah didn't run. He didn't hide. He simply stepped backward into the dark, as if showing Harris that the city itself was his refuge, that he could dissolve into any shadow he wanted, that he knew the blind corners better than anyone who ever chased him. The alley twisted right, then narrowed. The beam of Harris's flashlight skimmed across damp brick, flickering graffiti, a discarded shopping cart with one wheel bent sideways. But the trail went cold, no silhouette, no footsteps, only the echo of a door slamming somewhere far off. Harris scanned the ground. Fresh footprints deep from weight led to the right wall and stopped. No continuation forward, no crossing, no smudge from a pivot or turn, as if the man simply lifted himself into the air and vanished. Then Harris noticed something above a metal fire escape ladder, slightly lowered, hanging just inches from reach. Dust had been disturbed. Drops of moisture still clung to the rungs. Elijah climbed, fast, silent, efficient. Harris pulled himself up the ladder boots, clanging in contrast to the phantom who'd climbed it moments earlier. The metal rattled, groaned, then settled. The top platform overlooked the back of several buildings, but the rooftops were empty. Just chimneys, vents, puddles reflecting the weak glow of a distant streetlight. Another dead end. But Harris felt watched, felt observed with a careful, predatory patience that made the hairs on the back of his neck rise. The city lights flickered through the fog. Somewhere below, a car screeched. Distant sirens cried in the background, but here on this rooftop it felt like the world held its breath, waiting for something to move. He returned to street-level senses, sharp mind-racing adrenaline churning. The young woman from the apartment stood in her doorway, hands trembling around the frame. Harris assured her she was safe, for the night officers would stay posted patrol cars nearby, her windows secured, but safety felt like a word with no weight in this case. Elijah watched her. Elijah chose her. And Elijah didn't choose without reason. Back at the precinct, night deepened into an unsettling stillness. Officers hunched over maps, computers, stacks of files. Rain ticked softly against the windows. The air tasted metallic as though lightning hovered just beyond reach. Every clue pointed to an approaching climax, a tension stretching tighter with each new discovery, each haunting detail Elijah scattered like breadcrumbs across the city. Harris laid out the timeline again. Elijah watching victims for years, sometimes decades, selecting them without clear motive, leaving no pattern except age and vulnerability, photographing them long before any disappearance, archiving their faces on walls like a twisted museum of fear. But something new stood out now, a detail he hadn't noticed fully until the storage unit in the photographs arranged by year one. Victim's face appeared twice. A woman named Mara Quinlan disappeared in 1989, disappeared again in 1993. Impossible. Unless Elijah staged her second disappearance a false lead, a planted event. Someone reported seeing her. Someone filed a tip. Someone claimed she boarded a bus and never returned. A tipster never identified. A tipster whose voice police never verified. A tipster who could have been Elijah himself. The realization hit Harris with a cold jolt. This wasn't coincidence. Elijah manipulated investigations long before Elena's case. He fed police misinformation. He created confusion. He sabotaged leads. He wasn't just a stalker or voyeur. He had been steering law enforcement for years, testing how easily he could influence the outcome. Harris's radio buzzed. Static crackled before a voice cut through. "We've got something. You need to see this." He arrived at the forensic lab moments later. On the table lay the cassette recorder retrieved from the storage unit. Technicians had stripped away the static and layered distortions. Beneath Elijah's calm monologue was another sound, one almost lost beneath the white noise like a whisper caught between breaths. The tech increased the frequency gap. A faint rhythmic tapping emerged. Irregular. Intentional. Like someone trapped signaling. Harris's jaw tightened. "How long has this been on the tape?" "From the beginning," the tech replied. He layered it under his voice. The tapping repeated. 4 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. A pattern that felt deliberate but impossible to decode. Morse code numbers. Too uneven. A signal possibly. A message. Or, a location. The tech overlaid the waveform on top of a map grid, aligning the spacing of the taps with measured intervals. When they adjusted the scale, 3 points aligned directly with major intersections in the city, 3 points forming a wide triangle across Seattle. And the center of that triangle, Pioneer Square. As though the entire game revolved around the place where it began. Harris returned to the evidence board, eyes burning with focus. He traced the triangle with his finger, noting the intersections, a bus depot, a closed diner, a public library under renovation. 3 places with high foot traffic, 3 places where Elijah could blend into crowds. But the center Pioneer Square was the core of his pattern. The place where Elena vanished, the place where the lockbox was found, the place where the bloodstain stayed hidden for 20 years. The tape wasn't just a taunt, it was a compass, pointing them back to the origin. At 2:43 a.m., Harris and a team returned to the square. Night pressed down heavily, draping the area in a suffocating silence. Streetlights cast long, trembling shadows across the cobblestone paths. The cafe where Elena worked had been replaced by a boutique. The alley was the same weathered, brick-damp pavement, the scent of old rain and older secrets. They fanned out, searching for anything new, anything shifted. Then one officer called out, voice tight with dread. A Polaroid lay on the ground. Face down. Fresh. The edges still curled from developing. Harris picked it up carefully. When he flipped it over, the breath left his lungs. It wasn't Elena. It wasn't a random victim. It wasn't the young woman from Capitol Hill. It was a photograph of the precinct. Taken tonight. Lights glowing through windows. Officers moving inside. A timestamp from 30 minutes earlier. But the twisted part, the detail that made Harris's pulse spike, was the reflection in the precinct window. In the reflection stood a figure. Tall, unmistakable, looking directly at the camera, looking directly at whoever stood inside the square, now holding the photograph. Elijah had taken this picture less than an hour ago. He had been at the precinct, watching, waiting, close enough to touch the window, close enough to see inside, close enough to photograph Harris's team without being seen. And on the back of the Polaroid, written in jagged strokes, was a new message. You're not the only one following clues. They spread out immediately, searching the square, scouring every corner. Nothing. Elijah was gone again. A phantom receding just as the light approached. But Harris felt something shift, something deeper than fear, a sensation like stepping into a story already written where each line had been laid down years before he ever entered the narrative. Elijah wasn't improvising. He was reenacting, repeating, echoing, rewriting the disappearance of Elena, but now with Harris woven into the fabric, tangled in the threads of a pattern older than the original crime. And the final line Elijah had written on the back of the Polaroid rang like a warning. Follow me correctly, or someone else disappears. Harris closed his eyes, the weight of the words pressing down like the entire city resting on his shoulders. The case had never been about solving a disappearance. It had always been about understanding a man who existed like a curse etched into Seattle's history. And now, the curse was awake. The city felt different by morning, quieter, heavier, as if Seattle itself had absorbed the weight of the night and was now holding its breath with the precinct. Clouds pressed low over the skyline, muting the light, turning the streets into a muted gray labyrinth that seemed to bend inward around itself. Detective Harris barely slept. His mind churned relentlessly, replaying the alley, the rooftop, the Polaroid, the voice on the cassette. Elijah wasn't just moving through the investigation, he was shaping it, manipulating it, threading his presence through every decision. Harris felt it in his bones. He was no longer tracking a killer, but navigating a maze the killer had designed 2 decades ago. At 8:14 a.m., a technician rushed toward him with fresh analysis. The Polaroid found in Pioneer Square contained a barely visible thumbprint on the bottom corner. It was faint, smudged, likely unintentional, but the ridges were unique, and, when scanned through the system, they aligned partially with the degraded fingerprint found on the envelope from the warehouse container. The 2 prints belonged to the same person. Elijah had touched both. It was the first time in 20 years he'd left any physical trace, but something about it felt deliberate, like a signature scrawled across the crime scene, a whisper saying, "I allow you to see this." Before Harris could interpret it further, dispatch notified him of something impossible, a call from a payphone near the waterfront, a payphone that shouldn't have been functioning anymore. The caller had spoken just 3 words before hanging up. Check the mirror. Harris drove there immediately, tires hissing on wet pavement. The waterfront was alive with the low rumble of ship's gulls screaming overhead, the salt of the sound thick in the air. The payphone hung crooked rust covering most of its frame. Only one other object occupied the booth, a small round mirror taped to the wall at eye level. Something scribbled across the glass in black marker. He leaned closer. The message read, "Not every reflection shows you." Beneath the words, an arrow pointed downward, directing his gaze to the base of the booth. He crouched. Behind the metal casing wedged between a bolt and a rusted support beam was a folded Polaroid. He pulled it out carefully. This one stopped his breath. It was a photograph of Elena, but unlike the others, this wasn't taken from a distance or through a window. She was looking directly into the lens, eyes wide, mouth parted, slightly like she was about to speak. Her face was illuminated by the flash, as if the picture were taken in a dark room. The timestamp was from the night she disappeared. The same hour. The same window of time when every witness described a scream swallowed by rain. She wasn't running. She wasn't walking. She was looking at someone, looking at Elijah. The realization struck like a blow. The Polaroid wasn't proof of life. It wasn't staged. It was Elijah's trophy taken moments before she vanished. Harris stared at her expression, searching for clues buried in her terror. Her pupils reflected two lights, one bright and direct, one dimmer behind it. A room, a corridor, a flash of something metallic, the details hid in shadows, taunting him with incomplete truth. Footsteps approached behind him, officers arriving late. But Harris already knew Elijah had been here long before anyone else. He moved to the next clue himself, trusting the tug of instinct more than any grid search. Elijah didn't choose locations randomly. He chose places tied to memory. The payphone overlooked the pier where the old ferries docked, the same ferries Elena used when visiting her parents in Spokane during breaks. Every step Elijah forced Harris to take traced deeper into her life. He walked the pier slowly. Fog rolled across the water like a living thing. Wooden planks creaked beneath his feet. The wind carried sharp bursts of cold across his face. As he reached the far end of the pier, he noticed a small black object wedged between the railings. Another USB drive. He pocketed it, knowing the precinct's digital unit would extract its contents. But before he turned back, something else caught his eye. A faint smear of black marker on the railing, nearly invisible beneath a layer of grime. The truth is beneath the waterline. The phrase repeated in his head as he drove back to the precinct. Beneath the waterline, beneath the surface, beneath what investigators saw, beneath the city's memories. Elijah loved metaphors, but he also loved precision. The message meant something literal. The digital team cracked the USB within the hour. It contained photographs, hundreds of them, not of people, of places. Underground tunnels, drains, abandoned basements, underpasses, pipes, crawl spaces, sublevels of buildings long demolished, areas beneath the surface where no one ever looked. In the middle of the folder, one image stood out, a manhole cover, painted with a single slash of red. The same symbol Elijah carved on the index card marking a future victim. Coordinates in the file's metadata led to a block near the waterfront railway. Harris drove there with his team, the city vibrating softly as trains passed overhead. The manhole sat in the middle of a narrow side street, barely noticeable except for the faint red slash in its corner. Officers lifted the cover. A thick, damp rush of stale air rose up from the darkness, carrying the scent of rust mildew and time. Flashlights lit the tunnel below, narrow, stone walls slick with moisture, old maintenance pipes running along the ceiling, signs of recent movement footprints in the dust, drag marks, a discarded glow stick, long faded. Harris climbed down first. The ladder groaned under his weight. The tunnel echoed with the hollow resonance of his boots hitting concrete. The deeper he went, the more oppressive the air became. It was colder down here. Colder than the streets above, colder than the rain outside, colder than the rational explanations that had once kept the investigation grounded. Light cut through darkness as the team followed. The tunnel forked. To the right, collapsed stone. To the left, a hallway disappearing into pitch black. A trail of scuff marks led left. They walked in near silence, each step magnified by the enclosed space. The only sound was water dripping rhythmically from overhead, punctuating each footstep like a slow, steady metronome. After several minutes, the tunnel widened into a small subterranean chamber. In the center stood a chair, old, wooden, weathered. Beside it, a small metal table. And on the table, a camera, mounted, aimed directly at the entrance, its red recording light blinking. Harris's pulse thundered as he approached. He pressed the stop button and reviewed the last few seconds of video. It showed the team entering the tunnel. It showed them approaching. It showed Elijah's point of view moments earlier, meaning he had been here, watching them minutes ago. A door to the right creaked faintly, the sound subtle, like the tail end of a recent movement. Harris turned sharply and entered a narrower passage. The walls tightened. The air grew colder. At the end was a small alcove barely large enough for one person. Inside lay something that made the chamber feel instantly smaller. A piece of fabric, blue, frayed, Elena's missing jacket sleeve, the sleeve that had never been found. Beside it, a chain, old, thin, broken at the clasp, and under the chain, a note. Harris lifted it with trembling hands. The handwriting slashed across the paper in crooked lines. "You're closer to her than you think. A single drop of fresh water landed on the note, not from the ceiling. From somewhere above, Harris looked up. A grate, metal, rusty, light flickering through it. Someone moving on the street above? A silhouette passed. Tall, broad, waiting. Harris climbed. The grate lifted. He emerged into bright morning light, but the street was empty. Only the echo of a footstep remained. And the certainty Elijah had stood directly above Elena's last remaining trace, as if guarding it, as if daring Harris to come closer, as if preparing for the ending. Elijah promised the ending only he understood. The grate clanged shut beneath Harris as he stepped onto the street, lungs heaving with cold morning air that tasted like iron and fog. The city moved around him in its usual rhythm, cars rolling steady pedestrians, pulling up jackets against the chill, the sound stretching out in slow, shifting silver, but none of it felt real. His pulse throbbed in his ears, his skin prickled with the memory of the silhouette drifting past the grate only seconds earlier. Elijah had stood there, the man who stalked Elena, who built tunnels of lies beneath the city, who haunted Harris's life with Polaroids and whispers. The pavement looked ordinary. The street felt ordinary. But the shadows still vibrated with the echo of a presence too deliberate to be chance. Harris scanned the block, catching the scent of rain rising from the asphalt, the faint aroma of roasted coffee from a shop down the street, the clatter of a bus pulling away. No figure, no movement out of place. Elijah had vanished again, not with panic, not with haste, but with the same smooth ease as slipping a bookmark into a story he'd written himself. Officers emerged from the grate behind him, faces tight with adrenaline and frustration. Harris's phone buzzed. The forensic team had expedited the last DNA sample, the one from the blue sleeve found in the underground chamber. It matched Elena. The cloth had been cut, not torn. She'd been restrained, moved, hidden. Elijah had kept pieces of her as markers along his path, as reminders of his control, as breadcrumbs to lure investigators deeper into his maze. For years, people believed he vanished after 1995. But he hadn't vanished. He had simply waited. Harris returned to the precinct, the windows still fogged with the damp breath of the city. Officers moved with urgency, a controlled chaos simmering beneath the surface. Maps, pictures, digital grids sprawled across the walls. The cold caseboard was no longer a sad relic collecting dust. It pulsed like the beating heart of the investigation. Elijah Harrow, a name with no digital footprint, a shadow with no home, a watcher who outlived every trail. Harris walked past desks covered in lab reports and half-drunk cups of coffee heading straight for the evidence room. He studied the folder marked Ward Elena, 1995, flipping through the pages until he reached the list of early tipsters. One entry leapt out, a call logged at 2:31 a.m. on the night of Elena's disappearance from an anonymous male voice reporting a woman running into the alley chased by a man. The voice wasn't followed up because officers believed it was the same janitor who gave a later contradictory statement. But what if the two callers were different? What if the second caller, the janitor, was Holt, and the first caller was Elijah? Harris checked the payphone location of the tip, not near Pioneer Square, not near the laundromat, but just 3 blocks from Elijah's last known residence in 1995. The triangulation hit Harris with sudden clarity. Elijah had inserted himself into the case the night it happened, not to help, but to control. He reported his own crime scene. He shaped the narrative from its first breath. Before Harris could speak, a young officer approached with wide, unsettled eyes. "Sir, we found something on the precinct's rear camera feed." She played the footage. 2:05 a.m. A figure stood behind the building, partially hidden in the narrow corridor between dumpsters. Tall, broad, head bowed, watching the windows, watching Harris. He stayed for 27 minutes without moving. Then without hurry, he turned and walked away, his silhouette dissolving into darkness. But as he stepped off camera, something fell from his coat. A small object glinted. A second later, heavy static, a flicker, then darkness. The feed cut out as though someone had passed a magnet across the cables. Harris swallowed hard. Send a team right now. That alley, that object. 20 minutes later, officers returned with a single item inside an evidence bag. A cassette tape. Unlabeled, dusty, old. The room grew tighter as Harris held it, feeling its weight, its cold edge pressing into his palm. The last tape had been a taunt, a riddle. This one felt heavier. He inserted it into the player. Static crackled, a low hum. Then Elijah's voice closer, clearer than ever before. "You've walked the paths I left for you," he whispered, tone unsettlingly calm. "You've followed my steps. You've searched my shadows. You've looked where I pointed." A soft exhale drifted through the speaker like someone speaking inches from the microphone. "But you still don't understand why." Harris's fingers curled into a fist. Elijah continued. "Everyone thinks a story begins with a moment, a decision, a crime. But the story begins long before that, with observation, with watching how people live, how they move, what they fear. A faint creak, a shifting of weight, a breath. Elena didn't die that night. Harris felt every muscle in his body tighten. Static burst again, swallowing a second of audio. Then she lived until sunrise. The room fell silent, absolute, heavy, suffocating. Harris's heart hammered. His thoughts tore backward through every assumption, every timeline, every report, every expert analysis. Elena alive after the scream. Elijah's voice softened. She asked questions. She tried to understand. She thought she could reason with what she didn't see. A pause. She died when the sun touched her face. The tape continued, the edges fraying into distortion as though the machine itself resisted playing the final confession. "We stood above the tunnel you found today." She breathed her last breath in the shadows beneath that grate. A slow, chilling breath. "And now you've stood there too." The tape crackled. Then Elijah's voice sharpened, cutting like broken glass. "You've walked every step of hers, and soon someone will walk every step of yours." The tape clicked off. Silence washed through the room like a cold tide. Officers exchanged looks. Some whispered, others stared at the floor. But Harris felt something else, an anger, a grief, a trembling undercurrent of dread that pulsed beneath his ribs. Elijah revealed his cruelty not for closure, but to ensure the pain lived on, to twist the cold case deeper into the city's bones. Suddenly, a shout echoed from down the hall. "Detective, we've got movement." Harris rushed towards the operations room. A camera feed displayed footage from the block surrounding the precinct. A figure stood across the street, not hiding, not running, standing still, facing the precinct, facing Harris, as though waiting. Elijah. The silhouette was unmistakable. Harris bolted for the exit. Officers followed. The street blasted with cold wind as they spilled onto the sidewalk, weapons drawn, scanning every corner. But Elijah stepped back just one step into the shadow of an alley. Harris froze, not out of fear, but realization. This wasn't a chase. This was a choreography, a reenactment. The same alley where Elena vanished. The same alley where Elijah bled. The same alley where the trail always returned. He walked toward it slowly, each footstep booming in his ears. Officers shouted behind him, but the world muted, narrowing into a single point of focus. The darkened mouth of the alley swallowing what little daylight remained. Harris entered. The smell of damp stone struck him. The echo of memory. The faintest movement. He raised his flashlight. A figure stood 20 feet away. Tall, broad, still, his face hidden in shadow. Elijah didn't move as Harris approached. Didn't speak. Didn't run. He simply stood there as though this was the final page he'd been writing for years. Harris stepped closer, the beam rising toward the man's face. But a blinding flash exploded. White, violent, disorienting. The flashlight clattered to the ground. Shouts erupted behind him. Boots thundered. When Harris's vision cleared, the alley was empty. The silhouette gone. Only a Polaroid lay on the ground where Elijah had stood. He picked it up with trembling fingers. It was a picture of Harris standing in that exact spot, taken seconds earlier. On the back, written in the same jagged script, "Cold cases never end. They simply wait for someone new to follow." Harris felt the weight of it, an ending without closure, a ghost without a grave, a truth without a body. And somewhere in the fog of Seattle, Elijah walked away, still watching, still waiting, still writing the next cold case.